Howdy, gang, and welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me once again. Today, I am going to share my review of Broken Weave 4.5e from Cubicle 7 Games. This 304-page hardcover landed in stores this week. It carries an MSRP of $59.99. And of course, if you order from Cubicle 7 Games, you will also receive the PDF absolutely free. Now, of course, if you just want the PDF alone, you can grab that over at DriveThruRPG for $29.99. All that said, let's swing on over to the other camera because here I've got Broken Weave 4.5e. And from here on out, I will refer to this as Broken Weave. A few things to mention before we get stuck in. First of all, my friends over at Cubicle 7 Games were kind enough to provide me with this review copy, but neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share this review with you. These days, it's important you know that. We're also not going to look at each and every page of the book, but I do want to give you a really good feel for what you're going to find inside Broken Weave. Lastly, this is a setting book for 5e D&D. This is not a standalone role-playing game. So in order to utilize Broken Weave, you must have at least the 5e Dungeons & Dragons SRD, and it's probably a little more helpful if you happen to have all three of the core books. But at the very least, you must have the SRD. All right, let's jump on in. First thing we're going to do is take a look at the credits page. There are a lot of folks who worked very hard to bring this to life. And to be honest, if I read all the writers and designers' names, we'd be here for about 5 minutes. Probably mispronounce a bunch of their names too. But we want to make sure that we give credit where credit is due. So as I mentioned, this is a setting book. And this is touted as a post-apocalyptic tragic fantasy setting. And while it is post-apocalyptic, I'm kind of surprised that it's being labeled that. And the reason behind that is because I think a lot of gamers out there who would really enjoy Broken Weave might steer clear because of the post-apocalyptic tag. So, like I said, this is more a dark fantasy setting. I wouldn't go as far as wanting to brand it post-apocalyptic, even though it is. So, like it, I think in some ways, I would think some gamers would see the post-apocalyptic tag and they're going to think, oh, it's Shadow of the Demon Lord. I don't like grimdark. It's not necessarily a grimdark setting. And interestingly enough, hope plays a huge role in Broken Weave, both as a concept and as a game currency. So we're going to start off by building a haven. And I really think that this is something that stands out about Broken Weave because the haven is the location that the player characters originate from. It's also a place they have ties to, and they are looking to protect the haven, expand the haven, grow the haven, improve the haven. I love the fact that right off the bat, the player characters have something that ties them together as well as drives them to adventure. So I love that aspect of Broken Weave. Now, there is a pre-generated haven that's included later in the book, and it's really well done. So game masters can utilize that if they want, or there are various different random tables that they can roll on or pick from. And I would certainly recommend if you're going to create a haven from scratch, do it with your players because that'll also tie them to the haven even more. So definitely like this quite a lot. And it is kind of a big selling point of Broken Weave. So as far as your character creation, a good amount of the page space in Broken Weave is devoted to survivor creation, because that's what the player characters are referred to as well as the haven creation. You're going to choose your lineage And of course, we do have our traditional fantasy species to choose from. We've got our dwarves, our elves, our halflings, our humans. We do have new lineages as well. So we've got that. And we'll get a breakdown of these explaining how these species differ in Broken Weave than what you would see in a traditional high fantasy role playing game. Now, it's important to keep in mind that many of the folks who worked on Broken Weave also were designers on the 5e supplements Uncharted Journeys, as well as A Life Well Lived. So we do see some concepts from those two supplements carry over into Broken Weave. So when you're creating survivors, you will have tables to roll on to create your life path. So, real nice way to get a background for that character very quickly. Here's the section where we see the various different lineages and how they differ. We get an explanation of what were they like before the apocalypse, before the breaking, as well as what takes place after the breaking. We get some traits that they tend to have, and then each of these lineages will have a curse. And one of the concepts of Broken Weave is decay. And the player characters will gain decay, which is a bad thing. They don't want a lot of decay because if they actually reach the level 10 of decay, they become monsters and they are no longer controlled by the player. They become NPCs controlled by the game master. But there are ways to get rid of decay. So keep that in mind. Once again, as I mentioned, hope plays a huge role in Broken Weave. But as the player characters gain decay, their curse becomes more apparent in it. It comes out more. Now, they will gain some abilities, but they also lose things. They lose memories of various different aspects of their world and their lives. Because one of the keys about Broken Weave and the world of Broken Weave is that decay is entropy, essentially. And people forget what brought them together, what bound them together in communities. They forget their past. They forget what the artifacts from the past do as well. And it's important to keep in mind that in Broken Weave, the player characters are not looking to rebuild the old world. They're looking to create a new world. And I love that. I think that is so cool. Very, very well done. So we're going to have 6 new classes. Each of the classes ties into a specific attribute. As far as your attributes, pretty standard as far as 5e goes. You can either assign certain numbers to your attributes, or you can roll 4 to 6 sided dice, discard the lowest, and that will be the attribute. And of course, we do also have our attribute modifiers, which are added to or subtracted from your d20 rolls. I also really like the fact that each of these classes also have 3 subclasses, and each of the subclasses are very unique. So they aren't just very similar, just with a few tweaks here and there. So, as an example, the maker is tied to dexterity. And the 3 subclasses that are available are the alchemist, the artificer, and a traditional style rogue. So all 3 are vastly different than the others. And of course, they all have certain class features that they all share. But I like that quite a bit. I think a lot of thought has gone into the classes as well as the different subclasses. Something else to keep in mind, these are going to be more powerful characters than even a traditional first level 5e Dungeons and Dragons character. And it makes sense because these are survivors in this post apocalyptic world. So they are going to be stronger, tougher, smarter, and or faster than the average NPC out there. Something else that I appreciate the fact that they're going to be more powerful. You'll probably see a little less min maxing with character creation because all of these classes, all of these subclasses are pretty powerful and they feel pretty balanced as well. So we will have talents for our characters. Now, talents are like feats, but they're not as powerful as feats. So it's even mentioned that the talents essentially two talents would equal a feat. Now, if you as a game master or your players do want to utilize feats from 5e, they certainly can. You easily can. In fact, one of the nice things about Broken Weave is you can bring over anything from 5e into Broken Weave because it's built on the 5e SRD. So I do like that. Now, one of the reasons why the player characters will travel around the world is because they're looking to protect their haven, they're looking to expand their haven, to build their haven, but they're also looking to connect with other havens which are out there. And they're also questing for various different artifacts because what they're trying to do is they're trying to create a new world from the ashes of the old. We've got a lot of different equipment, a lot of gear, different weapons. We do have some crafting, some relatively light crafting in order to modify equipment and give them various different aspects. So I thought that's kind of cool. Some items will already automatically have an aspect to it. So we've got that. We have skills. We have a new list of skills. Got to be honest, I wish there were a few more. I mean, one of the things with 5e, as far as the skills go, is they are really broad, rather abstract. That's still the case here. But then again, I'm not looking to turn this game into a basic role playing sort of game where you've got 50 different skills on your character sheet. I get that. Just would have liked to have seen them drill down a little bit more. Now, we do have some new mechanics, some new rules going on. We have extended tests and group tests. I gotta say, not super fond of these. Extended tests, the player is going to roll multiple times to complete a task that they're looking to achieve. And it's something that if it's got multiple steps or it takes quite a bit of time, then they're going to be rolling multiple rolls in order to complete it. I think I'm a little less keen on the group test. So if the player characters are teaming up to achieve something, those characters who are taking part in that task are going to roll. And if everyone succeeds, well, then they succeed. If one person fails, then they all fail. I'd like to see that tweaked a little bit. We do have some new actions. One aspect I already talked about a bit is decay. Decay plays a huge part in Broken Weave because not only is the decay going to affect the player characters, it permeates the world. So everything has some amount of decay. Some might have a little bit of decay, some might have a lot of decay. And once again, it's a range of 1 to 10. So decay affects the land. It also affects the people. It affects monsters. So there is a scale of 1 to 10. So, as an example, if the player characters were traveling through an area that's marked as a 1 decay, it's pretty safe. It's pretty stable. They don't have a lot to worry about. Now, higher levels of decay, they're going to be concerned about not only gaining decay themselves, but fighting monsters, facing various different hazards, things like that. Now, I also mentioned hope plays a huge role in Broken Weave, and hope is essentially an in game currency that the players will earn and the players can spend. And there are a variety of different things they can spend hope on, including automatically succeeding at a roll, doing a critical hit, and avoiding a death blow. So hope can be very powerful as far as the gameplay itself and keeping your player characters alive. Something else that plays a big role in Broken Weave, and this kind of carries over from Uncharted Journeys, are the journeys that the player characters will embark upon. As I mentioned before, the Haven helps push the questing because you'll have various different adventures based around meeting other havens or going and finding something that will improve the player character's haven or defending the haven from monsters. So, as far as the journeying aspect to Broken Weave, we do see some aspects from Uncharted Journeys carry over, such as the various different journeying roles of the player characters, downtime and resting during the journeys. So, a lot of big changes to the core elements of 5e in Broken Weave. And for the most part, they're really well done and really welcome also. So, we're also going to get into information about the world of Broken Weave. So, we get a bit of a gazetteer, both kind of player facing, and then we'll get into more detail for game master facing. So, an interesting aspect of Broken Weave is the world before the breaking isn't really all that important. So, you could easily make this Faerun or Greyhawk or any fairly traditional fantasy setting which has undergone the breaking. I've got to say that Broken Weave will play out very epically with your player characters. So then we'll get into some information about the time before the breaking, after the breaking. We talk about different areas of the world, as I mentioned, gazetteer sections. This is more here. This tends to be a bit more game master facing here with important NPCs, various different other havens. We get our example haven that the players and game masters can utilize if they don't want to go through rolling one up. But as you can see here, this is the gazetteer section. Then we get into what is truly game master facing, talking about storytelling, talking about different tropes that you're going to utilize in these adventures, kind of the steps of the adventure. We get a GM toolbox, essentially. So we get some random tables here to give the game master inspiration. Then we'll start getting into some of the artifacts, which are really unique, very interesting. And as I mentioned, the player characters are searching out these various different artifacts to bring back memories of the prior world because these artifacts will help to tie these various different havens together with shared memory. So, pretty cool. We get into the ecosystem of Broken Weave, some information about creating flora and fauna, as well as a gazetteer. And we'll pretty much wrap up with the gazetteer. One of the things I really like about the gazetteer is that we actually get sections that talk about role playing that creature, monster, what have you, and what happens when fighting that monster. I talk about this all the time. One aspect that kind of turns out to be a stumbling block for a lot of dungeon masters, especially dungeon masters who are just starting out, is how do you utilize the monsters? You have to kind of decipher the stat blocks and the various attributes to kind of get a better feel for how you would utilize the creatures and monsters, not just in combat, but just role playing them as well. And I love the fact that we actually get detailed information to help the game master out. So that's pretty cool. So we're going to wrap up. We're going to get some thanks to all the backers from the Kickstarter. And then we'll have our character sheets. We also have a Haven sheet and a journey tracking sheet. There's all the Kickstarter backers. And an index, of course. And then here are our different sheets. It's a journey chronicle, I guess I should say. Very cool. And an ad for Uncharted Journeys, which I've already mentioned. We get some of those concepts from Uncharted Journeys and A Life Well Lived in Broken Weave. So that's a peek inside the book. Let's swing on over to the other camera because I'm going to share some final thoughts and give this a review score. So, all in all, I really like Broken Weave. I think it's unique. I think it stands out. It looks to accomplish something different. It's not just your traditional high fantasy role playing game. But then again, it is not necessarily overly grimdark. It is a dark fantasy setting. And yes, it does take place after an apocalypse has essentially destroyed much of the world. But I still don't think of it as a post apocalyptic role playing game because hope plays such a huge role in the game. And the player characters are out there looking to build a new world because they are driven by the desire to make their havens a better place for their loved ones and tie them together with other havens to create more community and to, like I said, to build a new world. Really like that a lot. I love the fact that we have some aspects from Uncharted Journeys as well as A Life Well Lived carry over to Broken Weave. I think that when the players create their characters, they're going to be very happy with the characters. They are going to feel like they're going to be memorable characters and chomping at the bit to start journeying. There are few things that I'm not super keen on. The new mechanics for the tests, I think, are a little bit clunky. All in all, the extended tests, the group tests, either they could have been kind of fleshed out a little bit more or explained a little bit better, gone into a little more detail, or tweaked a little bit. I think my least favorite is the group tests where it's sort of like, okay, well, you're all working together to do something. One person failed, womp womp. I personally would probably tweak that a little bit. Production quality throughout, top notch. Paper quality is excellent. Artwork throughout is fantastic. I will say some sections of the book feel a little sparse as far as artwork goes, but the artwork, like I said, is excellent. It's pretty uniform too. So there aren't any glaring pieces of art where you just, how did that get in here? Or anything like that. I gotta say, as far as the presentation, I think everything's well laid out, pretty intuitive. I think most game masters will have a very easy time just sliding right on into Broken Weave, especially if they currently run 5e or are overly familiar with 5e. So I like that. Now, something I will mention that really isn't going to affect the review score at all, but something I did want to bring up is I am kind of surprised that Broken Weave is for 5e because I do know Cubicle 7 Games is working on their C7D20 fantasy role playing game, which is going to be a high fantasy role playing game. And I do believe it's going to be broken up into two books. There'll be a player's guide as well as a game master's guide. I don't know how far along in the process Cubicle 7 Games is in that. I don't think there's a playtest out there just yet. I'll reach out to my good friend T.S. Lukehart from Cubicle 7 Games to maybe learn a little bit more about that. I would have thought Cubicle 7 Games would have maybe made Broken Weave its own role playing game or focused on making it a supplement for C7D20. And yes, I get it. C7D20 is probably going to be very 5e adjacent. I'm sure it's going to share a lot of design DNA with 5e. Otherwise, why go with a D20 design anyway. But like I said, kind of surprised that it's tied in to 5e D&D. Although, yes, I do get it. Third party D&D supplements do tend to sell very well if people know about them, because that's one of the problems with many third party 5e products. People aren't aware of them, they get lost in the crowd. So, a lot of really cool third party stuff floating around out there doesn't get eyes on it because there is just a glut of third party 5e content. Sadly to say, much of it absolute trash. But I have to say, Broken Weave for 5e is not trash. This is really well done. This is very cool. I think it's unique. I think if you're looking for something that's off the beaten path, it's not your traditional high fantasy, and it's not, once again, grim dark or anything along those lines. It's more dark fantasy than anything else. I think you'll really like Broken Weave for 5e. So, on a scale of 0 to 10, I give Broken Weave a 9 out of 10. I think it's that good. I think if you are into running Dungeons and Dragons, you're looking for something different, or dive into a new setting that has a very unique feel to it, I think Broken Weave should be part of your collection. All right, that is it for this time out. If you like the video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring that bell. It will not only let you know when I share videos such as this review, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings at 7 p.m. Central right here on YouTube. And of course, when you're not watching videos here on the channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you will not find on YouTube. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Thank you very much for watching. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer, and until I see you next time, I certainly hope all of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.